A little over a decade ago, my kids and I moved to Arkansas and quickly found ourselves to be on the verge of homelessness. Miraculously, I stumbled across an abandoned house. Long story short, I found the owner of the home and received permission for my children and I to move in. Several people told me stories of ghosts in this home, but a haunted home does not bother me, so we promptly moved in. We lived there for over a month before I could have a hot water heater put in and hook up running water to the home. This was a rather dark period in my life, and to say that I was more or less dropping the ball is almost an understatement. I was depressed and not attending to my household as I should have. Often the home was quite messy and unkempt. I noticed that when I did not keep the home in order, weird things happened. One night during a thunderstorm, our landline phone literally blew up and flew across the room in pieces. We thought lightning had hit the line and traveled into the house, but nothing else was affected. The television and the computer were both on at the time. Looking back, I wonder how only the phone was affected. New light bulbs would often blow out, dishes would somehow fall off of the countertops and break even though no one was in the kitchen, and it didn't take more than 2 months before the brand new water heater inexplicably broke. Somehow I sensed that this was all due to the displeasure of the ghosts we could feel, and sometimes hear, at my lax housekeeping habits. When I began to keep the house up again, the entire atmosphere of the home lightened somehow. This went on for about 3 or 4 months, however, due to the ups and downs of divorce and relocating over 700 miles from my home and family. When my kids left to visit their father for the summer, I slumped back into depression and ignored my housekeeping once again. As soon as the house became a mess, the second new water heater simply died and several pipes burst. Having to spend the money to repair them snapped me back to reality, and I straightened up. I could feel the difference in the atmosphere of the house once again. I began to talk to the entities I could feel in the home. I thought there was a woman there. One day I was in the kitchen doing the dishes, and I caught something moving out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head to see what had grabbed my attention, somewhat behind and to the right of me. Walking from the bathroom, through the back of the kitchen and toward the living room was the full-body apparition of a man dressed in a 3-piece gray flannel or wool suit, with a white shirt, dark tie, and he was wearing an old-fashioned gray hat with a black hat band. His shoes were dark and of a similar style to old-fashioned men's dress shoes. He was rather stern-looking and was tall and thin with short dark hair. The style of clothing was perhaps from the 1930s or 1940s. He did not look at me nor acknowledge me in any way. I could clearly see a somber expression on his face. I watched him take 2 or 3 steps before he simply vanished into thin air before my eyes. The wall behind him was different somehow, and it was like the items I had against that wall were suddenly not there. He was walking right through a large bird cage, but where he stood the cage did not exist. It is difficult to describe the difference in the wall and items, as the apparition only lasted a very short time and I was focused on the man himself rather than the difference in surroundings. It was quite startling and very clear, but only for about 30 seconds or so. It was the middle of the day, and the kitchen was bright and sunny. I remember thinking that it was far too hot out for anyone to be dressed in such a suit. I did not feel scared by this presence, but I felt as though he was in some way letting me see him to tell me that he expected and insisted upon the home being kept in a tidy condition. Although I continued to hear things and items seem to move in the home when the kids swore they hadn't touched anything, if I left any type of a mess when I went to bed or work, I never saw the apparition again. If I left a sink load of dirty dishes overnight, often I would awaken to something broken on the kitchen floor in the morning, even when I was the only person in the home that night. Whenever the man I was dating would spend the night, things would happen. It was almost like they disapproved of a single mother in general, but absolutely disapproved of a single mother dating intimately. Often things on the kitchen or bathroom shelves would be on the floor in the morning. I believed that an older couple from a more traditional time occupied the home and they would quickly express their disapproval whenever I did not act in a traditional way. I do not think they approved of me, but always had the impression and the feeling that they cared for the children. Nothing belonging to my children was ever moved or broken. I tried to discover who this man could have been, but never did figure it out, and I could never discover if anyone had died in the home or on the property. I never saw a woman. That is simply something I felt, and the feeling I had was that she was not as harsh or disapproving as the man was. While I did have pet dogs at the time, I did not have a cat, and many of the items that had somehow gone from a shelf to the floor could not have been reached by the dogs. In case you're wondering, I have no history of mental illness, was not taking drugs either illegal or prescription, nor have I ever experienced hallucinations. I have, however, always been somewhat sensitive to many aspects of the paranormal.